Putin Bad News. As Ukraine continues to push back on Putin's forces, there has been talk of Russia running out of tanks. Putin's invading forces are being pounded by Ukrainian forces, and Russia's top defense official has admitted that Russia is running out of tanks on the front line. This comes after Vladimir Putin recently expressed concern over a potential dearth of drones, an integral part of his war effort. Sergei Shoigu has called for more tanks to be produced to meet the needs of Russian forces, as Russian troops face sophisticated Western armor on the front lines amid Ukraine's counteroffensive. The defense minister visited a factory in western Siberia and emphasized the need to maintain the increased production of tanks, while also enhancing the safety features of the vehicles. As footage emerged last week showing armor on both sides destroyed in the fighting, Russian President Vladimir Putin made a rare admission of battlefield losses. Putin told Russian military bloggers and journalists that since the start of Ukraine's counteroffensive on June 4, Moscow's forces had lost 54 tanks. He also mentioned that there was a lack of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, or drones for frontline troops. Ukraine's military leadership says that their country has lost 114 tanks to Russian forces since June 4. While the exact number of Moscow's casualties remains unknown, Ukrainian forces have been attacking and making gains across the front. The Zaporizhia Oblast in the south has seen some of the heaviest fighting, with reports that Ukrainian forces have liberated several villages there. Ukraine made gains of about 2 kilometers around the destroyed city of Bakhmut, which saw the deaths of tens of thousands of Russians during its capture. According to the latest report from Ukraine's General Staff, Russian forces have begun offensive operations on the fronts in Luhansk, Donetsk, and Kharkiv, but are still on the defensive in Zaporizhia and Kherson. Ukrainian forces, according to the General Staff, successfully repelled the attacks. On June 18, it was reported that Ukrainian forces had shot down 2 Russian Ka-52 attack helicopters. There have been rumors circulating online that Russia has been increasing its use of these helicopters in an effort to strike at Ukraine's attacking forces. Nearly 4,000 Russian tanks have supposedly been destroyed by the Ukrainians since the conflict began. Even if that figure is exaggerated, it is undeniable that Putin's forces have lost a tremendous amount of men and equipment in battle since the invasion began a year and a half ago. Get the latest breaking news along with photos, in-depth analysis, expert opinion, and video covering the topics that are most important to you. Today's superpowers are confronted with some very difficult strategic dilemmas. How much of the United States' time and energy should be spent on countering Russia when China is obviously the more powerful country? How much should China help Russia in a war that has weakened Moscow's economy and international standing? Can countries in the Indo-Pacific strike a balance between China and the United States? Is it better for the European Union to try to establish its own independent pole, or to rely on the United States, which is riven by partisan divisions? Now, perhaps more than ever, is the time to put together a plan of action. Who then are the best international relations strategists in the world? As a general rule of thumb, they are anyone you believe will finally get what they deserve in the next few years. If you think that this forecast is being cynical, just think back 20 years. Grand strategy experts like John Lewis Gaddis lauded former U.S. President George W. Bush's national security strategy after 2001, despite the fact that it resulted in 2 costly wars that lasted a combined 20 years. A few years later, the counterinsurgency strategy developed by then U.S. Army General David Petraeus was all the rage, but today, it is safe to say that Petraeus' star has faded. Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Gerasimov doctrine have recently received high praise for their tactical agility and strategic boldness in the gray zone of conflict between declared states of war and peace. However, Putin now appears to be a leader stuck in quicksand who will lose even if he wins, after nearly 16 months of grueling conflict in Ukraine. The Russian paramilitary commanders make fun of the Russian general Valery Gerasimov, after whom the doctrine is named. Those at the strategic apex are not unlike the stock market gurus and financial entrepreneurs who used to grace the covers of business magazines. Anyone praised by the business press has a good chance of failing financially and becoming embroiled in scandal. What seems like a new insight today may seem like a rotten, gnarled piece of fruit in a few years. This is true in both business and politics among the world's greatest powers. With this in mind, it's natural to wonder if it's even possible to write a book about the science of strategy that will remain relevant for more than a few years. I have doubts because I have written extensively on the pointlessness of attempting a grand strategy and have contributed to edited volumes on the topic. The Prussian general Karl von Clausewitz, author of On War and one of history's most frequently cited strategists, observed that anyone who achieves fame as a result of their strategic acumen will inevitably fall into the trap of believing in their own strategic genius and making ego-driven mistakes. The best piece of strategic advice is to be humble in the face of success, which is easier said than done given how highly strategists are often held in regard.